I'm Margaret Caldwell, 78 years old, a woman who has seen the world change in more ways than I can count, and I had to watch my own daughter fake her child's college graduation just to shame her other child. She thought I would sit by and let it happen. She thought her web of lies was stronger than my love for the truth. So I played along, I smiled, I helped her plan the party right up until the moment I revealed a secret she had buried, and it crushed her entire world in front of 50 of her most important guests. My story isn't about revenge, not really. It's about a sickness in my family's roots, a poison that I allowed to seep into the soil for far too long. It starts, as these things often do, with my daughter Laura. From the time she was a little girl, she was preoccupied with appearances. While other children were making mud pies, Laura was arranging her dolls for a perfect tea party, not to play with them but to have them admired. I thought it was a passing phase, a harmless quirk. I see now it was the first sign of a deep and hollow insecurity that would one day threaten to break our family apart. When Laura had her own daughters, Ava and Chloe, that insecurity found a new home. Ava, the older by a year, was born looking like a porcelain doll. She was a quiet, biddable child who learned early that pleasing her mother brought warmth and praise. Chloe was different. She arrived with a shock of unruly hair and a cry that seemed to shake the windows. She was all fire and questions, constantly taking things apart to see how they worked, her hands always smudged with dirt or paint or eventually flour. Laura loved them both, I know she did, but she approved of Ava. Ava was a reflection of the perfect life Laura wanted to project. Chloe was a variable, an unknown quantity that messed with the pristine image. This dynamic became our family's quiet, painful rhythm. I remember Chloe's 5th grade science fair. She had spent a month building an intricate model of a volcano, complete with a baking soda and vinegar concoction that actually erupted. She was so proud, her face beaming under a smudge of red food coloring, but Laura barely glanced at it. Her focus was on Ava's project, a neat, tidy diorama of a scene from Little Women which had won an honorable mention for artistic presentation. Laura spent the entire evening pointing out Ava's blue ribbon to anyone who would listen, while Chloe's volcano sat on a forgotten table, a monument to her unacknowledged effort. Another time, when the girls were in high school, Chloe won a regional award for a short story she had written. It was a dark, beautiful piece about an old clockmaker, wise and poignant beyond her 16 years. I was bursting with pride. I had it framed. Laura's reaction: "That's nice, dear, a bit morbid, don't you think? Did you see Ava's report card? Straight A's again. She's on track for early admission to the university." The framed story was never hung on the wall in Laura's house. It stayed in a drawer while Ava's academic certificates took pride of place on the mantel. These weren't isolated incidents. They were the bricks that built the wall between my granddaughters, a wall mortared by their mother's approval and disdain. I tried to intervene over the years in my own quiet way. I would take Chloe out for special afternoons, just the two of us. I would praise her art, her writing, her fiercely independent spirit. I'd say to Laura, "You have two remarkable girls, each in their own way." And Laura would smile tightly and say, "Of course, Mom," before changing the subject back to Ava's latest triumph. My words were like stones skipped across a vast, unmoving lake. They made a small ripple and then sank without a trace. I should have thrown a boulder. The party was my boulder. The beginning of the end started, as it often did, at Sunday dinner. I'd make the drive to Laura's house, a pristine colonial in a neighborhood where the lawns were all cut to the same length. Walking in was like entering a magazine photo shoot. Everything was beige and cream and utterly spotless. It was the perfect backdrop for the perfect family Laura was so desperate to portray. That particular Sunday, the air was thick with a cloying sweetness that had nothing to do with the apple pie cooling on the counter. Laura was practically vibrating with excitement. Ava, who was in her final year at the State University studying business, sat beside her mother looking pale and withdrawn. She picked at her food, her eyes fixed on her plate. On the other side of the table, Chloe sat with her shoulders slightly hunched, as if bracing for a blow. She'd recently graduated from a prestigious 2-year culinary program and was working grueling hours as a line cook at one of the city's best new restaurants. To me, she was a resounding success. To her mother, she was a disappointment. "We have the most wonderful news," Laura announced, clapping her hands together. Her voice was an octave too high. "Ava has not only finished all her final exams with flying colors, but she's graduating with honors. Can you believe it, my brilliant girl?" She reached over and squeezed Ava's arm. Ava flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, and forced a watery smile. "Thanks, Mom." "With honors? Oh, Ava, that's marvelous," I said, trying to inject some genuine warmth into the room. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hand as she set her fork down. Something was wrong. Chloe spoke up, her voice quiet but clear. "That's great, Ava, congratulations." Laura turned her head slowly, her smile tightening. "Yes, it is, Chloe. It's what happens when you apply yourself to something serious. A real degree from a real university. It opens doors." The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Chloe's culinary degree in Laura's eyes was not real, her passion was not serious. Chloe's jaw tightened, but she didn't take the bait. She'd learned long ago that arguing was pointless. Instead, I saw her glance at her sister, a look of profound, aching sadness in her eyes. It wasn't anger, it was pity. "And to celebrate," Laura continued, her voice regaining its performative cheer, "we are going to throw her the party she deserves. I've already booked the clubhouse ballroom for the first Saturday in June. Caterers, a string quartet, everyone will be there. We have to show everyone how proud we are of our graduate." As she spoke, weaving a fantasy of social triumph, I watched my granddaughters. Ava stared into the polished surface of the dining table as if it were a deep, dark well she could fall into. Chloe watched her sister with that same look of heartbreaking compassion. The thread of my daughter's lie was beginning to unravel, and only Chloe and I seemed to notice the frayed end. Later, as I was getting my coat to leave, Chloe followed me to the door. "Can I call you tomorrow, Grandma?" she whispered, her back to the living room. "There's something I need to tell you." "Of course, my dear," I said, patting her hand. The skin was rough and calloused from her work, the hand of a creator. I squeezed it tightly. The next day she called, her voice was thick with tears. "Grandma," she began, her voice cracking, "it's all a lie, the whole thing." I sat down heavily in my old armchair. "What's a lie, sweetie?" "The graduation. Ava's not graduating, she's not even in school anymore. She dropped out in February, Grandma. She failed 2 of her classes last semester and was put on academic probation. She was too scared to tell Mom, so she just stopped going. She's been pretending for 3 months." The silence on the line was profound. I thought of Ava's pale face, of the tremor in her hand. It wasn't the stress of finals, it was the terror of being caught. "Oh, Chloe," I breathed, "how do you know?" "She told me last night after you left." She broke down. "She's been leaving the house every morning and sitting in the library all day so Mom wouldn't know. Mom found a generic graduation announcement from the university in the mail and just ran with it. She planned this whole honors story herself. Ava is trapped, Grandma. She's terrified of Mom. She says this lie is like a monster that gets bigger every day." A cold, hard anger began to form in my chest. This was beyond favoritism. This was a cruel fantasy, a pageant staged on the back of one child's fear and another's humiliation. Laura wasn't just celebrating a lie, she was building a monument to it, and she intended to use Chloe's supposed failure as the cornerstone. "What is she doing to you both?" I murmured, more to myself than to Chloe. "She's making Ava a prisoner, and she's making me the court jester," Chloe said, a flash of her old fire cutting through the sadness. "And I don't know what to do. If I say anything, Mom will destroy us both. If I don't, I have to stand at that party and watch everyone praise my sister for a lie while Mom tells jokes about me being a dropout." The irony was so bitter it tasted like acid. The one who had actually graduated from her program with distinction was being called a failure, while the one who had dropped out was being celebrated as a star. I looked around my quiet living room at the photos on the mantel. A photo of me and my late husband, Charles, a photo of Laura on her wedding day, her smile bright and hopeful, and a large, framed photo of Chloe and Ava as children, their arms slung around each other, laughing in a field of wildflowers before their mother's expectations had built a canyon between them. "You're not going to do anything," I said, my voice firm, the decision crystallizing in my mind with sudden, absolute clarity. "We are." The weeks leading up to the party were a masterclass in my daughter's particular brand of psychological warfare. Laura was in her element, a whirlwind of phone calls, fabric swat, chess, and guest lists. The house buzzed with the nervous energy of a Broadway production on opening night, and like any good director, Laura was determined to manage her cast. Her primary target was Chloe. Every conversation became an opportunity to highlight the chasm between her two daughters' supposed paths. One afternoon, I was in the kitchen with them. Laura was on the phone with the caterer discussing canapés. "No, not the mini quiches. Too common," she said into her phone, waving a dismissive hand. She hung up and turned to Chloe, who was quietly wiping down the counters. "Chloe, dear, you work with food. What do you think would be more impressive, bacon-wrapped scallops or prosciutto and fig crostini?" "Both are nice, Mom," Chloe said evenly. Laura sighed, a theatrical, long-suffering sound. "It's for a celebration, Chloe. It needs to feel upscale. I suppose when your clientele is just looking for a quick bite after a show, presentation doesn't matter as much, but this is important." It was a jab disguised as a question, a deliberate devaluing of Chloe's hard-won career. Chloe was working under a chef who had been nominated for a James Beard Award. Her clientele were food critics and people who booked reservations 3 months in advance. But in Laura's world, if it wasn't a degree in business or law, it was little more than a hobby. Chloe's face remained impassive, but I saw her knuckles turn white as she gripped the sponge. Ava, meanwhile, was a ghost haunting her own celebration. She drifted through the house, agreeing to everything her mother suggested in a listless monotone. The dress fitting was excruciating. Laura had chosen a confection of white lace and silk, a dress more suitable for a wedding than a graduation party. "Doesn't she look like an angel?" Laura cooed, circling Ava, who stood on the pedestal like a mannequin, her eyes hollow. "It's really pretty, Mom," Ava whispered. Later, when Laura was distracted, I found Ava in her room, staring out the window. "Are you all right, dear?" I asked gently. She jumped, startled. "Oh, hi, Grandma. Yes, I'm fine." "Ava," I said, sitting on the edge of her perfectly made bed, "you know you can talk to me about anything." Tears immediately welled in her eyes. "I can't," she choked out. "If I tell her the truth now, I don't know what she'll do. She's spent so much money. She's invited everyone, her boss, her friends from the club. Telling her now would be worse." "Worse than this?" I asked, my voice soft. "Worse than feeling like this every single day?" She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face, a prisoner who had come to fear freedom more than her own cage. That evening, Chloe came to my house. It had become our sanctuary, the one place where the masks could come off. She slumped onto my sofa, exhausted. She told me today that I should ask my boss for the night off for the party, Chloe said, her voice flat. And when I told her it was a Saturday and we were fully booked, she suggested I quit. She said, "It's not like it's a real career, Chloe. Family should come first." I poured her a cup of chamomile tea, my hands shaking with a quiet rage. "She is trying to break you," I said. "She can't," Chloe replied, her chin lifting with that familiar spark of defiance. "But I'm worried about Ava. She's getting thinner, she barely sleeps. This is destroying her." "I know," I said, "which is why we are going to end it, but we have to be smart. A simple confrontation won't work. Your mother is a master of deflection. She will twist it, turn it back on you, on Ava. She will make herself the victim. The truth has to be revealed in a way that is undeniable." And so, our alliance was forged in the warm, quiet space of my living room. We were the unseen, the underestimated. I was the old woman who was supposed to nod and smile, and she was the failed daughter who was supposed to know her place. From that position of perceived weakness, we started to build our plan. "The party is her stage," I said, the idea taking shape. "So we will use her stage. She wants a show, we'll give her one." My role was to be the doting grandmother. The next day I called Laura. "Laura, darling, I was thinking about the party," I said, my voice full of manufactured enthusiasm. "You know, with all those people there, it would be so lovely to have a little tribute. A slideshow of photos, Ava through the years, it would be so personal." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the gears turning in Laura's head, calculating the social currency of such a display. "A slideshow," she repeated slowly. "Mom, that's a brilliant idea. It's perfect. It adds a personal touch, a sense of family history. Oh, the guests will love it." "I'd be happy to put it together for you," I offered. "It can be my gift to Ava. You just focus on everything else." "Would you?" "Oh, Mom, you're a lifesaver," she gushed, completely oblivious. The bait was taken. My second call was to Chloe. "Phase 1 is complete," I told her. "Now I need you to be my secret agent. I need photos, Chloe, but I also need more. I need proof of your success, your diploma from the academy, any awards you won, and I need you to talk to Ava. Gently, we need one more piece of the puzzle and only she can provide it." Over the next 2 weeks, we worked in secret. Chloe would come over after her long shifts, smuggling out old photo albums from her mother's house. We'd sit at my dining table, sorting through pictures, creating 2 piles. One pile was for Laura's show, Ava on her first day of school, Ava winning the spelling bee, Ava in her prom dress. The perfect, curated life. The second pile was ours. It was Chloe, covered in mud, holding up a prize-winning pumpkin. It was Chloe on stage, accepting her short story award, her face flushed with pride. And then came the new additions. Chloe brought me her framed diploma from the Culinary Academy, graduating with highest honors. She brought me a glowing magazine review of the restaurant that specifically mentioned the brilliant young sous chef in the kitchen. And then one evening she brought me a folded piece of paper. Her face was grim. "Ava gave me this," she said. "It took some convincing, but she knows this has to end. She just doesn't have the strength to do it herself." I unfolded the paper. It was a printout of an official email from the university registrar's office addressed to Ava Jennings. The subject line was "Academic Withdrawal Confirmation." The date on it was February 17th. It was cold, hard, and undeniable. I looked at Chloe, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "She's trusting us," Chloe said, "to not let this destroy her completely." I placed my hand over hers. "This isn't about destroying anyone, my love," I said softly, though I knew some destruction was inevitable. "It's about clearing the ground so something true can finally grow." With the final piece in my hand, the script for Laura's grand finale was complete. In the final week before the party, a strange, tense calm settled over Laura's house. All the major decisions had been made. The RSVPs were in, 52 guests, a fact Laura mentioned at every opportunity. The dress was altered. The string quartet had their playlist. All that was left was the waiting. My own role became that of the benign, slightly dotty grandmother. I'd call Laura every other day to give her updates on my progress with the slideshow. "Oh, it's coming along beautifully, dear," I'd chirp into the phone. "I found the most adorable picture of Ava on her first tricycle, and that one from her ballet recital. Precious, this will be the heart of the party, you'll see." "That's wonderful, Mom. Just make sure the music isn't too old-fashioned," she'd reply, her mind clearly on other things. She never once asked to see it. Why would she? I was just her harmless old mother putting together a sweet, sentimental tribute. The thought that I was capable of deception, of orchestrating a palace coup, never crossed her mind. Her perception of me was my greatest weapon. I spent my evenings in my study, a room filled with the scent of old books and lemon polish, a place my late husband Charles and I had shared for 50 years. With a resolve that would have made him proud, I meticulously crafted the slideshow. It was a work of art, a narrative designed with the precision of a surgeon. The first 2 minutes were exactly what Laura would expect: a schmaltzy, heartwarming montage of Ava's childhood set to a saccharine piano piece. Baby photos, school photos, family vacations. The perfect daughter. Then, at the 2-minute mark, the music would shift. The tone would become more serious, more reflective. This is where the story would pivot. Chloe and I had one final meeting 2 nights before the party. She was a bundle of nerves, twisting a tea towel in her hands. "I feel like I'm going to be sick, Grandma," she confessed. "What if this is a terrible mistake? What if it just makes everything worse?" "Worse than living a lie?" I asked gently. "Worse than watching your mother slowly erase you while suffocating your sister? Sometimes, my dear, a wound has to be opened up to be cleaned. It will hurt. I won't lie to you about that, but it's the only way it can heal." I showed her the final sequence of the slideshow on my small laptop screen. I walked her through it slide by slide. The triumphant photo of Chloe in her chef's whites holding her diploma, the magazine article, the new stunning edition she had brought me only yesterday, a scanned copy of an official signed letter. It was a formal offer for a 6-month apprenticeship at a 2-Michelin-star restaurant in Paris, an opportunity of a lifetime, one she had been too afraid to even mention to her mother. And then the final, devastating slide, the university email. Simple, black and white, undeniable. She stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. "When you show that last one," she whispered, "what will happen?" "The truth will happen," I said, "and we will deal with the fallout together, all 3 of us." I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope. Inside was a plane ticket, one way to Paris. "This is my gift to you for your real graduation, the one you earned." Tears streamed down her face, but this time they weren't tears of sadness or frustration. They were tears of disbelief, of gratitude. She threw her arms around my neck and held on tight. "Thank you, Grandma," she sobbed into my shoulder. "Thank you for seeing me." "Always," I whispered, holding my shaking, brilliant granddaughter. "I always have." The day of the party, I arrived early at the clubhouse, the USB drive containing my digital bombshell tucked safely in my purse. The ballroom was stunning, I had to admit. Laura had outdone herself. The tables were draped in ivory linens with towering centerpieces of white roses and hydrangeas. The string quartet was softly playing Vivaldi. It was a perfect picture of elegance and success. Laura, dressed in a shimmering silver gown, greeted me at the door, her face flushed with excitement and pride. "Mom, you're here, doesn't it look amazing?" "It's beautiful, Laura," I said honestly. "You've created a lovely event." Ava was standing near the entrance, greeting guests like a royal receiving her subjects. She was wearing the white lace dress. In the soft, flattering light of the ballroom, she looked less like a prisoner and more like a tragic heroine from a Victorian novel. Our eyes met across the room. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. A flicker of something, fear or maybe relief, crossed her face before she turned back to her mother's friends. Chloe arrived a few minutes later, straight from her shift. She was wearing a simple, elegant black dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked tired but resolute. Laura swooped in immediately. "Chloe, you made it. I see you couldn't be bothered to change out of your work clothes," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, though Chloe's simple dress was far more sophisticated than many of the frilly outfits in the room. "It's a classic black dress, Mom," Chloe said, her voice steady. "It's appropriate for any occasion." "Well, try to mingle, don't just stand in the corner looking gloomy. It's a party," Laura said before turning to greet a new arrival with a dazzling smile. I watched the interaction, the final drop of poison before the antidote. The guests were all here. The stage was set. The audience was waiting. I walked over to the young man in charge of the AV equipment. "Hello," I said, giving him my most charming, grandmotherly smile. "I'm the mother of the host. I have the slideshow here for the tribute. Could you get it ready for me?" "Of course, ma'am," he said, taking the USB drive. "Just let me know when you're ready to go." "Oh, I will," I said, patting his arm. "The timing is very important." The party was a symphony of polite chatter, tinkling glasses, and the gentle strains of the string quartet. Laura moved through the room like a queen, accepting compliments on the decor, on her dress, on her brilliant daughter. She was in her glory, completely immersed in the fiction she had so carefully constructed. I watched her, a glass of water in my hand, feeling a profound sense of melancholy. This elaborate performance was all for her, not for Ava. It was to soothe her own anxieties, to shore up her own fragile sense of self-worth by presenting a perfect child to the world. About an hour in, Laura tapped a spoon against her champagne flute, calling for everyone's attention. The room quieted down. She stood in the center of the dance floor, beaming, with Ava standing stiffly by her side. Chloe and I stood near the back by the table with the projector. "Hello, everyone," Laura began, her voice ringing with emotion. "Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate this incredible milestone with us. As a mother, there is no greater joy than seeing your child succeed, seeing all their hard work and dedication pay off. And my Ava, well, she has made me the proudest mother in the world." She paused, dabbing a perfectly dry eye with her fingertip. From her very first A+ in kindergarten, I knew she was special. She has always been so focused, so driven. She never gave us a moment's trouble. While other kids were distracted, shall we say, Ava had her eye on the prize, a real education, a real future. And now here she is, a graduate of our state's finest university with honors. A wave of applause filled the room. Ava stared at the floor, her cheeks flaming red. I saw Chloe take a small, steadying breath beside me. Then Laura did something that sealed her fate. She turned her gaze toward the back of the room, a smirk playing on her lips. "I believe in supporting all my children's choices, of course," she said, a sack. charring sweetness coating her words. Even their unconventional ones, we all have to find our own path, I suppose. Some of us find it in a university lecture hall, and some of us find it in a hot, greasy kitchen. A few of her friends tittered politely. It was a direct, public, and utterly cruel blow. She was using Ava's fictional success as a weapon to humiliate Chloe. In that moment, any lingering doubt I had about what I was about to do vanished. This wasn't just about a lie anymore, it was about abuse. "So let's raise a glass," Laura continued, oblivious to the ice forming in my veins. "To my daughter, Ava, to a future as bright as she is, may she continue to reach for the stars." "To Ava," the crowd echoed. As the applause died down, I stepped forward. "Laura, that was a beautiful speech," I said, my voice carrying across the quieted room. "If you don't mind, I've prepared a little something as well, my gift to the family, a little trip down memory lane." Laura's face lit up. "Oh, Mom, yes, of course. Everyone, my mother has put together a little surprise for us." She gestured grandly to the large white screen that had been set up. "Dim the lights." The ballroom lights went down, leaving only the soft glow of the candles on the tables. All 52 pairs of eyes turned to the screen. I gave the AV technician a firm nod. He hit play. The slideshow began exactly as I had described it to Laura. The gentle piano music started and the first photo appeared, a picture of a chubby, smiling baby Ava. It was followed by Ava on a swing set, Ava on her first day of school, Ava with a missing front tooth. The guests murmured in appreciation. "Oh, how sweet. Look at her." Laura stood with her arm around Ava, squeezing her shoulder, her face a mask of maternal pride. For a full 2 minutes, the lie continued. Pictures of Ava at her middle school graduation, Ava at her prom, Ava on the university campus during orientation week. It was the perfect sanitized history of a golden child. I let the illusion hang in the air, sweet and fragile, just long enough for everyone to believe in it. I glanced at Chloe, who stood as still as a statue, her eyes fixed on the screen. The trigger was set. All that was left was to pull it. The final picture of the first sequence faded to black. It was a photo of Ava and Laura, taken just a few months prior, smiling on the university quad, the iconic clock tower in the background. The gentle piano music swelled and then softly faded out, leaving the room in a profound, expectant silence. For a brief second, everyone thought it was over. Then, a new sound began. It was a different piece of music, not piano, but a solo cello. It was somber, reflective, and deeply resonant. A new title card appeared on the screen in elegant, simple script. "But every family has more than one story." I heard Laura let out a small, confused laugh. "Oh, Mom, what's this?" The first image to follow was not of Ava. It was a picture of Chloe, aged 10, her face streaked with mud but beaming with joy, holding up a ridiculously oversized pumpkin that had won a blue ribbon at the county fair. It was a photo Laura had hated, one she'd stuffed in a box in the attic. A quiet gasp rippled through the guests who were closest to us. The next slide showed Chloe at 16 on a stage, clutching a plaque, her face glowing with the shock and pride of winning the Regional Short Story Award. The cello music continued its steady, soulful melody. Then came a photo of Chloe in her crisp chef's whites, standing with a group of other young chefs, all of them grinning, their arms thrown around each other. The caption below it read, "The graduating class, Philadelphia Culinary Academy, with highest honors." The room was utterly silent now. The polite chatter had ceased. All eyes were glued to the screen. I could feel Laura's confusion morphing into a cold, dawning horror. She took a step away from Ava, her smile frozen on her face. The next slide was a high-resolution scan of a magazine page. It was the review from Philadelphia Magazine. I had highlighted the key sentence in a soft, elegant yellow. The kitchen, under the brilliant direction of Chef Dubois, is energized by a team of rising stars, most notably the young sous chef Chloe Jennings, whose creativity with seasonal ingredients is a revelation. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's my favorite restaurant." Laura's face had gone pale, her eyes darted from the screen to Chloe, then to me. The mask was cracking. She was losing control of her own narrative in her own ballroom in front of all her important friends. Then came the crown jewel of Chloe's achievements. A crisp, official letter appeared on the screen. The letterhead was from one of Paris's most revered restaurants. The text was clear and unambiguous. It was a formal offer to Chloe Jennings for a 6-month apprenticeship, a position hundreds of aspiring chefs would have killed for. We are exceptionally impressed with your skill, your passion, and your palate. It is with great pleasure that we offer you this position. The cello music swelled to a poignant crescendo and then softened, holding a single, long note. The story of the failure was now complete. She wasn't a failure. She was a quiet, uncelebrated, spectacular success. I let that image hang there for a full 10 seconds, letting the weight of it settle into the room. I glanced at Chloe. A single tear was tracing a path down her cheek, but she was smiling, a real, brilliant smile. And then I delivered the final blow. The screen went black for a moment, the cello note faded into silence. The entire room held its breath. A new final image appeared. There was no music, no artistry, it was just cold, hard text. A black and white printout of an email. The guests in the front rows leaned forward to read it. To Jennings Ava Emmet Statue, Edu. From Registrar at Statue, Edu. Date February 17. Subject Academic Withdrawal Confirmation. Dear Ms. Jennings, this email serves to confirm that your official withdrawal from the university has been processed, effective immediately. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. The silence in the room was no longer expectant. It was a thick, heavy, suffocating thing. It was the sound of a perfectly constructed world shattering into a million pieces. In the deafening silence, all eyes shifted from the screen to my daughter. Laura stood as if she'd been turned to stone, her face a ghastly shade of white. Her mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out. The triumphant hostess, the proud mother, had vanished. In her place was a woman laid bare, her desperation and deceit exposed for all to see. The first person to move was Ava. She let out a choked sob, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. The terrible weight she had been carrying for months had finally been lifted, albeit in the most brutal way possible. She turned and fled, not looking at her mother, not looking at anyone, just running from the ballroom, the white lace dress trailing behind her like a shroud. Laura's spell was broken. The guests, her friends, her colleagues, began to murmur. They averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their dinner plates, their wine glasses. The embarrassment in the room was a physical presence. They were not embarrassed for Ava or for Chloe. They were embarrassed for Laura. They had been made party to her lie, and they were mortified. Without a word, people began to quietly gather their things. A man I recognized as Laura's boss gave a curt, almost imperceptible shake of his head and guided his wife toward the exit. The retreat was quiet, orderly, and absolutely devastating. It was the social equivalent of a house being condemned. Within 5 minutes, the room was half empty. The string quartet had packed up their instruments and vanished. Laura still hadn't moved. She just stared at the blank screen where the proof of her undoing had been displayed. I walked over to her. Chloe was a few steps behind me. "Laura," I said softly. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were filled with a terrifying cocktail of fury and betrayal. "You," she whispered, her voice venomous, "you did this to me, your own mother." "No, Laura," I said, my voice steady and clear, no longer needing to hide behind the facade of a harmless old woman. "You did this. You did this to Ava. You did this to Chloe. You built this house of cards and you were angry that it couldn't stand up to the wind. I just provided the breeze. You humiliated me," she hissed, her voice rising. "You were humiliating your daughter," Chloe's voice cut in, sharp and strong. For the first time, she was not backing down. "You were calling me a failure in front of 50 people to cover up a lie about Ava. What did you think would happen, that we would just stand there and take it forever?" Laura looked at Chloe as if seeing her for the first time not as a disappointment, but as a force to be reckoned with. There was no flicker of remorse in her eyes, only the raw, wounded pride of a narcissist who had been exposed. She turned on her heel and walked away, not after Ava, but toward the bar where she poured herself a stiff drink with a shaking hand. I knew there was nothing more I could say to her tonight, maybe not for a long time. The wound was too raw, her pride too shattered. My work with her was done for now. My work with her daughters was just beginning. I found Chloe and we went looking for Ava. We found her outside, sitting on a stone bench by a decorative fountain, her face buried in her hands, the beautiful white dress now stained with tears and grass. Chloe sat down beside her and without a word put her arm around her sister. Ava collapsed against her, sobbing uncontrollably. "I'm so sorry, Chloe," she wept. "I'm so sorry, I was so scared." "I know," Chloe said, stroking her hair. "It's over now, it's okay, we're okay." I watched them. Why two granddaughters clinging to each other in the wreckage of their mother's making. The wall between them had crumbled. In its place, something new was being built, a bridge. "She's right, Ava," I said, sitting on her other side. "It is over, the lying is over, and you don't have to be scared anymore." Ava looked up at me, her face swollen and red. "What's going to happen now?" "Now," I said, taking her hand, "you get to be honest. You get to figure out what you really want, not what your mother wants for you. And Chloe," I turned to my other granddaughter, whose eyes were shining in the moonlight, "you get on a plane to Paris and you become the brilliant chef you were always meant to be." I stayed with them for a long time until the tears subsided and the moon was high in the sky. We didn't solve everything that night, but we cleared the ground. We took the first painful step toward a new kind of family, one that might, with time and care, be built not on appearances but on truth. The grand party was over. The 50 guests were gone. And all that was left was the three of us and the quiet, hopeful, terrifying prospect of starting again. I learned something that night. I learned that love isn't always gentle. Sometimes love has to be fierce. It has to be the axe that cuts down the sick tree to save the forest. I had spent too many years being a gentle gardener, tending to the healthy plants while ignoring the poison ivy creeping through the roots. My greatest mistake was not in what I did at that party, but in my silence for the 20 years before it. A lie, especially a family lie, is a hungry ghost. The more you feed it with silence, the stronger it gets until it's powerful enough to consume everyone. I had to stop feeding the ghost.